Season 40, Episode 9. Here we go again. The show continues, and so does the fun for we viewers. So yesterday, I turned 59 years old. Happy birthday to me. Thank you to the countless numbers of you who had fun comments and happy birthday wishes on all my media, Twitter and YouTube, everywhere. Thank you. Appreciate that. Brings me back. So that was 20 years earlier, midway through filming season 1, when I decided to spend my entire birthday nude filming Survivor in the year 2000. That was something. Wow. 20 years ago. And here we are recapping season 40, episode 9, in the midst of a pandemic. Crazy. I hope everybody's staying safe, hanging out at home, get this over with. If you stay in, you pay attention, you do your thing. I know you've heard it 1,000 times. We'll get through this hump. And by then, hopefully, they'll have some treatments and a vaccine. And we go back to the world we knew. Meantime, I wonder how much time you're spending on social media and Zoom or Skype. That's one way to stay connected. I don't know how many of you noticed, but I have had time to respond to a few more comments than usual, since I do find myself wandering through the different social media feeds trying to figure out what to talk about this week. Actually, I'm going to start with a great comment I got. Let me look for it. One of the better comments I've received that helps me remember just how stupid some people are. I'll explain in a minute. Darren Bukator, Bukator, says, 8 recaps, ? He's still doing this, ? Captain Condescension wouldn't last 8 days out there. So full of himself. I love it. That is the epitome of stupidity. That is, here, if you're a Survivor fan, you know that's what everyone said from day one 20 years ago. That's what Mark Burnett believed. That's why they selected me as a contestant. So here he is, still continuing the same boring dialogue. Captain Condescension is how I play and have fun with you, the viewer. Jeez Louise, Darren. Catch up. Season 40, episode 9. It starts with kind of an interesting comment from Michelle that exposes the emotion that undermines the playing of the game oftentimes for many of the contestants. Let me see if I can get that. My little note that I take.
Michelle says, these people are bumbling, fumbling idiots. I can't stand them.
So we're coming back from Tribal Council, getting ready to start the episode, and there's Michelle talking to folks when she comes back into camp. These folks are stumbling, bumbling idiots. I can't stand them. And that's her emotional reaction to having been outside the loop. She wasn't part of voting out Wendell. So she, very frustratedly, calls them all bumbling, fumbling idiots. And that's dangerous when you let that kind of emotion creep in just because you weren't part of a play, just because you weren't informed. You expose a weakness, a vulnerability that might get exploited. Well, in this case, Nick is the same. He's really upset and, just not going to take it anymore, basically, because he was outside the loop too. And now he feels tired, kind of being on the bottom. Nick needs to get a little more energy from the idea of anybody but me. If Nick could relax in the idea that, okay, I was near the bottom and I didn't go, he could move forward much more effectively. What he doesn't seem to remember is that very often things change on a dime, and certainly in Winners at War, things change quickly. So just because you were on the bottom all last week, and just because you weren't part of the loop, you weren't included in who got rid of Wendell, doesn't mean that you can't get right back on top this week. And that's the way your mind has to work. You can't wallow in this kind of stress and negativity and still expect to play the game really well. Evidence that the emotion causes a certain amount of detachment and irrationality is, for example, when Nick says in front of Tony, hey, I'm the only one who didn't know, and he's angry and frustrated about Wendell having been voted off and him not having been included. But he's saying it right in front of Michelle being there too. And Michelle had no idea that Wendell was the target, that Wendell was the one going to be voted off that week. So that's a little odd. And I hope you see that kind of a slip, maybe not right there on the way back from tribal, perhaps people won't be so invested in paying attention to your emotion. Maybe they give you a little bit of a leeway, but a good player would be paying attention to your expression of emotion, particularly the pessimism and the negativity, and they latch onto that to make you more of a target, to focus energy on you who are expressing those kind of negative feelings. Just something to think about when you get on Survivor. Pay attention to your emotions. It's a big part of the game. The game has to be the focus. It can't be how you're feeling. You've got to learn to separate that in order to play well. In contrast, we have Adam, who you've heard me talk about him in the past 8 episodes, and his kind of flailing and anger and emotions, etc. But he's doing something really well here. He's doing something right. He's come back from tribal council and he's happy. It's not me. That's good, Adam. That's good. Maintain that it's not me. Fascinating that he thinks perhaps the fleur-de-lis, which he pronounces fleur-de-lis, on the podium at tribal council may be an idol. A not so hidden immunity idol. And we'll see, in this episode how that plays out. But it is something I should note now that he is at least aware of that possibility. Any kind of observation like that is valuable. It shows you somebody's paying attention. It's somebody's still got the energy to focus. If he's contemplating whether or not that thing on the podium has some value in the game, his brain is still functioning within Survivor, and it's not distracted by his often negative emotional flailings, I'll call them. A little similar to Tony, but Tony's not negative, and Tony is very, very likable in his freneticism, I often call it, where Adam isn't. Adam's freneticism and flailings are often very tight and negative and off-putting to other players. That kind of self-awareness is valuable. So we move to Edge of Extinction, and the clue says something about stepping back, and people read the clue and head up to the top of the hill. Well, let's step back when we get to the top of the hill, etc., etc. And Parvati and Danny are somewhat separate, and Danny says, wait, I think I know what it is. It's like when Aubrey did the same thing and they stepped back and looked at the stairs. And so they head down and they find the idol. But here's the rub. Well, there are 2 things that I noticed. One was that it seemed to me it was Danny's idea, that it was Danny who thought this through, and it was Danny who wandered down with Parvati, telling Parvati about it, Parvati going, oh yeah, it's got to be that, and going down. But then it's Parvati, the one who gets the idol, who gets the coin that you can flip. I thought about that a little bit, and I thought, if I were Parvati, or if I were Danny, who had the idea, I would have wanted to try and explore that on my own. I would have thought, wow, if that does seem so likely, why not wander around with Parvati the way you were, and then when you're going down and you have a moment maybe between the other people and you're kind of alone, you grab it. It's not like other people are going to think the same things that you're thinking. That could have been game-changing, theoretically, depending on what was there to be found. Nobody knew it at the time. And so I don't like when people share that kind of information without getting something in return, without having thought through the impact of sharing it rather than finding something on your own. Anyway, so they go down the stairs and Parvati pulls it out and reads it, and they learn that it is a coin that you can flip, either safe or not safe, at tribal. So it's kind of an immunity, but not really. And here's the danger in that. It's kind of related in a way that I wonder if people have thought about to Adam's fleur-de-lis at tribal. And here's how. Parvati took the coin and sold it to Michelle for 4 tokens. 4 fire tokens sounds pretty darn valuable to me. Yeah, does that get Parvati and Danny some peanut butter? That's great. I think it's good for them. But what about Michelle? She saw that it was the coin flip, safe or not safe. I could be safe, I might not be safe. You can only play it up until there are 7 people left or something like that. Is that really worth 4 fire tokens? The danger in having it is that you might be tempted to use it when you weren't sure whether or not you were safe. And so it might make you a little bit lazy. Oh, I've got this thing that if I need to, I can throw it up in the air at tribal council and maybe then I'll be safe. Well, maybe you won't. So this is one of those interesting, I don't know, it's not an idol, interesting like gifts that could be a curse. And I don't know that I would have paid 4 fire tokens for it. I probably wouldn't. Yes, I get it, that if you had no other options, you knew you were the one going out and it was time for you to try anything. Hey, flip a coin and let's hope. But you don't want to get yourself into that position, and preparing for such a position with something that could only get you out of it 50% of the time by giving away 4 fire tokens seems costly to me. Here's what I mean by how it's related to the fleur-de-lis. Everybody seems to be criticizing Adam for taking a risk, I guess is the word they use. Why would he take that chance? What's the deal? There's no risk when you're at tribal council. What a zoo that tribal council is, but we'll get to that. And you're pretty certain that there's a high possibility you could be the target. And if Adam at that tribal council didn't think there was a high possibility he could be the target, he'd have to have been brain dead. But regardless, whether you were the target or not, whether you thought there was some possibility, it's not a risk for you to stand up when Jeff says, if anyone has an immunity idol and they'd like to play it, now is the time to do so. Why wouldn't anybody who was aware of that, if they thought there was any possibility of them going home, even the tiniest, walk up and check that to give to Probst? And just say, hey, I thought maybe this might be an idol and there's a possibility I could be going home. That's not a risk. There's no risk involved. That would have been fun to see if this thing that was sitting in front of everyone that looked like it could have been an idol was an idol, and to have played it at tribal council. It's a bigger risk for Michelle to have bought that coin than it is by far for Adam to have reached out and tried to see if the fleur-de-lis were an actual idol, especially given the position that Adam found himself in. I had one of you say, and Rich is always thinking we don't understand things. And, and one of his favorite parts is, me wondering if you guys can follow. So did you follow all of that? And as I explained to the guy who made the comment, it's not because I don't think you're right. It's because I don't think I'm clear. I keep wondering whether or not I've filled in the details and communicated the idea the way I've understood it in my mind. And so my comment is very often, did you follow that? Are you able to follow it all? Just so you know what I'm thinking. That's what's in my head. So now we're at the challenge with the fish. They swim, they get the net full of fish, they go up and they do the puzzle. And you know what I think of challenges. They're great to watch, they're fun, they're interesting. They don't have a lot to do with the game. Here's how this one has to do with the game. So Sarah is part of the winning team. Denise had to sit out, so she had no chance at the reward. But Sarah won, as part of the winning team, participation in the reward, a food reward. And Sarah says, for humanitarian reasons or whatever, I'm going to give Jeff, can I give my reward to somebody else? She gives the reward to Nick. And if anything in Survivor is educational and helps viewers understand the difference between real world interaction, real personalities of compassion and caring, and dead center, middle of the game Survivor gameplay, this is a great example of it. Clearly, it's my opinion that Sarah was sincere in feeling kindly toward Nick, in feeling as if she knew how much he would appreciate it. It had just been his birthday, he hadn't eaten, he was feeling down. She probably noticed the negativity, that he was being left out of the vote. And instead of being the cutthroat, game-focused human required to be really successful in the game, Sarah did not contemplate sufficiently the impact of making the choice that she made. So giving that reward to Nick was perceived not only by everybody else as manipulative and a negative on Sarah, focusing on her as to how could you give up energy that could help you get through further into the game, etc., but also by Nick, who thought, Sarah's a really good player. She got rid of people left and right the last time she played, and he wasn't able to accept the gift in the kind and compassionate way it was actually, I believe, intended. So that should show you, I hope it does, how the game is so different from the real world. When you come back out and you're in your day-to-day life, there are ways in which interaction with people are called for. And if you're that kind of a person, a kind person, a caring person, a compassionate person, that makes sense to be that person. We shouldn't be living in a world in which all we do is cut one another's throat. But we don't have lots of examples of that even in the real world, because people who we consider relatively successful, the Trumps, the the wealthiest are often very, very cutthroat. But who cares? Unless that kind of money at anyone's expense is your only goal, then I'm suggesting living well and compassionately and caring for folks is valuable. It is not within the game of Survivor. That even if somebody was not a compassionate person in real life, there may be times for them to fake it and pretend to be in the game. That's how skewed the game is from how the course in real life might be. That last night's episode pointed that out better than anything I've seen in a long time. Sarah was just abused behind the scenes after having done that, after having tried to make a compassionate move, one that she felt strongly would be kind. And when you do that, it is at your expense, very, very likely, within the context of the game. And that appears to be what's happened here. Somebody might argue that, oh, but it'll come back later, and maybe Nick would appreciate it when there's an opportunity later for her to help him to help her, etc. I hope you saw, in the edit at least that we saw, Nick didn't appreciate it. And Nick was not swayed by that. And Nick happily enjoyed that reward and the food. But he's not necessarily in the mindset where he's thankful to Sarah for having done it, and never mind willing to give her help, assistance, or a pass later in the game. I know that's not why Sarah did it. I've said that. But still, if you're in the game to win the game, play the game. Play the game. I keep giving you examples of how emotions undermine gameplay. This is another one. So Sarah, it's just a game. And when you get overwhelmed with that feeling of wanting to be the kind human being I know you to be, kill it. Kill that feeling and crush whomever it is. Watch them suffer. Leave them to starve and move on. Play Survivor. I feel like I've been crediting Tony this season, and I don't mind it. There are a number of things that I've talked about with respect to Tony and his freneticism that have to do with his personality that I'm still not convinced are intentional. But there are things that are intentional. And last night, Tony sat with Sarah and pointed out to her how there are times in the game when the entire game shifts, when just a small decision, when a tiny, seemingly kind, for example, incident can undermine the whole rest of one's game. And I loved seeing Tony do that. He was talking, obviously, to Sarah about her having given up her reward to Nick. And it seemed to me that Tony was razor sharp clear about how that could affect her negatively. I got to give him kudos for that. That's a good player, to think so clearly about how someone could be so negatively impacted by such a seemingly good, kind gesture. So I liked seeing that, and I liked seeing it be an intentional thing for Tony to be communicating that to Sarah. You know, the cops are us thing is strong. And I like that he really was trying to help her. And he did it in a way that wouldn't undermine their dynamic. He didn't push too hard. He just laid it out. I don't get the sense that Sarah's open to understanding the danger that she is in as a result of having made that decision. But he tried, and I like that. That could bode well for Tony in so many ways later. because he can point out the effort, etc. We'll see how that plays out later in the season, or if it has any effect at all. But I think the only effect it could have for Tony would be positive, for him to have tried to help Sarah understand what the choice she made, what effect the choice she made had. And the reward, the food, was the Chinese food. And how many of you loved seeing them looking for some kind of clue, some kind of an idol, something within the food, within the Chinese food containers or somewhere there? I was happy to see that. Because for some reason it feels to me as if we at least have not been shown people who you would expect would be looking at all times for opportunities and idols and potential clues, etc. We just haven't been shown them doing that. So it was nice to see them in the midst of eating their reward, actually looking for possible advantages. We get to that part in the game where Michelle was very excited and she made the exchange. She gave Parvati 4 fire tokens for the coin, safe, not safe coin. What do you think? Should she have done that? I've already shared my opinion. I don't think I would. I really don't think I would have paid 4 fire tokens for something so tenuous, so possibly of no value whatsoever. Because you can't know tomorrow what might be available for those 4 tokens. It isn't even like the peanut butter that Tyson bought for 1. I might have held off on that too, and look, it was to his advantage. It was a good decision. The peanut butter is full of energy. This token, this safe, not safe coin may be of absolutely no value and potentially dangerous, just having it in hand, thinking you might be able to get some advantage by playing it. Ooh, that's a tough one. Not worth 4 fire tokens, I don't think. For those of you who've been missing my comments about Ben, how about this challenge on those triangles in the ocean? Balancing Ben Kung Fu style in the water. Tell me he didn't look like the epitome of masculinity. He's up there and I don't know. Go Ben, buddy. If anything in this game, just you as eye candy makes me happy. You know what, bud? You're more than that. You are playing, and I do like much of the way in which you have confronted people and engaged, and we'll talk about one of those incidents coming up here in a minute too. Because I think I'm going to defend you. Surprise, surprise. That whole challenge out in the ocean comes down to Ben versus Kim. And the stability, Kim's stability was awesome. I suppose I probably should have watched some of the other contestants as they were balancing. I was just so focused on Ben. But she did. She takes it. Good for her. What are you thinking about the way she's been playing? What are you thinking about her demeanor? It's consistent. It always has been in her Survivor gameplay. Well, we have talked about a couple of blips when emotions got to her, etc. But she's really an incredible player, I think. And this challenge gives her a break. Really, that's what a challenge win does. Gives you a break to kind of step back a little bit and reassess without the stress of thinking, wow, you might be next. Because you know you're not. So kudos to her. Good for her. She held it, and immunity is hers. What about Nick? You know, we're seeing scenes of him being more and more and more frustrated. So it isn't simply a reaction post-vote, post-tribal, where his emotions are high and he's frustrated. They continue. And he's really, really upset about being at the bottom or his name being out there as a possibility. And he isn't handling that kind of positioning where he has found himself in the game of Survivor very well. He's handling it in an unnecessarily stressful way, talking about how he's going to take this game over and he's going to do this and he's going to do that. Well, my recommendation would be to try to relax a bit and to think about how you might do some of these things that you're saying you're going to do. And I don't think there's a lot of thought behind how he's going to do that. He's got this bull in a china shop mentality right now, expressing how he's going to just, bash through. I'm taking over the game. I'm doing this. And that just can't bode well for him. It's not good to have those kinds of feelings when you are really on the cusp of people's focus to get rid of. If they've been paying attention to you, you don't want to give them more reason to keep their focus on getting rid of you. And that's unfortunately how this feels to me, the way Nick is expressing such angst and anger and frustration. Okay, another Survivor lesson, which actually I think many of you probably got. I bet we have different takes on what really happened or what you would do, though, among us as viewers. Let me give you my take on what happened in the exchange between Ben and Adam. When Ben confronts Adam and asks him who it was that tossed out his name, when Ben is asking Adam a question that Adam then goes frozen, Adam's not just caught. Adam is exhibiting the typical, awful, unprepared, lost focus, emotionally overridden reaction of freezing, of having no answer, of not going with the flow, of not being a good Survivor player. What's worse is Ben is aware of that. Ben confronts him, asks him, Adam can't answer, chooses not to answer, whatever it is, and Ben shuts it down right there. Good, got it. That's what it is. You're the one who said it. And instead of either kind of comfortably apologizing or thinking of a different way to approach Ben that would prevent Ben from continuing to think so negatively about Adam, Adam keeps pushing and says stupid things. Even later in Tribal, I think he said something when Ben pointed out that he wouldn't even answer the question. Adam said, well, I'm not going to answer it if it's going to throw somebody under the bus. Well, then make something up or throw them under the bus. It's a game. So what you chose instead of doing that was to suck at the game. And that was really clear in that interaction. Now, I know some of you would challenge me about the way in which Ben confronted him. But I think Ben had sufficient knowledge about what Adam had said. I think Ben had enough trust in his sources to know that it was likely true that Ben was the one saying, be prepared to throw Ben under the bus. So Ben's confronting Adam, the way Ben did it, from my perspective, was awesome. Why not come right out and do that in that case? I could always make an argument for subtlety. I can always make an argument for kind of hinting, helping somebody understand that you may know this or you may know that, rather than pointing directly and saying, hey, give me an answer. This is what I think happened. But in this case, I think Ben was so clear about what happened and he didn't need what could have come from being more subtle or more gentle. So I love the way he confronted Adam. And I think Adam's horrible reaction, non-answer, defensiveness, his anger and misplaced frustration with Ben when he's really should be frustrated with himself for not being able to answer that question more capably, more confidently, in more of a way that would shift the dynamic and take away the focus from his having done something to Adam. That's too bad. But that's example after example we see of things that happen in the game that kind of solidify your demise. This is one of them for me. If I were Ben, would not be able to feel confident in Adam the way it seems when they go back and forth with each other. They were trying to share the level of confidence they were trying to share through the game can be short term, can be longer term. Sometimes it's inevitable that it's going to end, but in this case, it seemed finally broken. If I were Ben, I would make certain that I didn't allow myself to have an inappropriate level of trust in Adam after having learned that Adam, not only after having learned that Adam betrayed me, but watched how Adam played so poorly in reaction to my question. I can't trust somebody like that in the game. I need somebody who's a better player, who's a more stable player, who's able, in my mind, it's Parvati, to roll through some of the challenges that make the game of Survivor. I feel like I could get through a lot with Parvati, even if she made choices that involved or appeared to involve getting others to move toward me. There are times that can happen and you still need to reconnect and use people as part of your alliance. And Adam's done when he does stuff like that, when he answers and reacts so poorly. Do you agree?
Wow, really crazy machinations before tribal. And with our limited perspective, there's just no way we viewers could have any idea what's actually going to unfold.
Prior to tribal council, all hell breaks loose. We've used that phrase a lot. You hear it over the years, the decades of Survivor unfolding. But this clearly, episode 9, season 40, is an example of a pre-tribal clusterfuck that, like no other. Back and forth and her and this and him. And how about the names that are thrown out, the kind of misdirection, the pretending with one person? Oh, it was fun to watch, but it does leave viewers, intentionally so, I'm sure, unable to know where the vote is actually going to land. Oftentimes, I would say in the overwhelming majority of episodes, we can typically have an understanding that it's likely to be either this person or that person. And sometimes we're surprised. But in this one, who's it going to be? Based on what we saw, the confusion prior to tribal, it could go in any direction. It could have gone in any direction. That's fun for me to see when things go awry that way and that there is so little control. And I think that's the kind of game my critics tend to think I couldn't play. Yeah, whatever. Oh my gosh. It's so untrue. I would use that turmoil. Anyway, I'm not going to give it away. Well, I probably will never play again. No shock to many of you. If I didn't play for 40, why would they call me back? But I could play. And I think that's the loss. The loss is that you aren't being shown a way in which someone after 40 seasons of Survivor, could play the game at an entirely better level. How's that for ego, for you guys who think I just am too full of myself? I guess I am. Unless I won. Huh. Then, are you overconfident? If you were confident you could win and then you win, but again, here, I can say this confidently because maybe I'll never get the chance to play and prove that I could win. Whatever. Enjoy. And the tribal council itself, that was more chaotic than even the pre-tribal council, which was chaotic as hell. So this is interesting for me because we've watched now as Probst lets whatever happen at tribal council happen. And that's an evolved position because getting up from your perch, standing up and going over and whispering to this person and that person, those kinds of things were prevented for years. And so now, as the game has evolved, although they aren't so common that they take place every single time, those kinds of interactions are becoming more and more common, where things aren't as settled as many people would like them to be as they move into tribal council. And it makes it very, very difficult for viewers. It's hard to stay so interested in the gameplay if you aren't exposed to much of it. We do catch some through the mics, we catch some of the whispers, but we're seeing many more conversations than we're hearing. And as a viewer, it would really be fulfilling if we were included in more. I know the editors don't want us to know who the final turnover is typically, who's definitely getting voted for. And we could watch as Adam lost his freaking mind and then began that stupid, distracting argument with Ben and continued it in the midst of others actually playing Survivor. So we probably had a good sense then, or I did, of where this was headed. But still, as a fan of the show and of the game, wouldn't it be nice to know what those people are saying to one another and to kind of be able to ascertain which people were being sincere and who was actually in the midst of Survivor and that drama and those dynamics playing people? Who was kind of going along but actually trying to play other people? That's a lot of information that would have been really, really interesting for me. And we just can't get it all. They can't provide us with all of those exchanges because some are at such a whisper and some are so quick that they aren't prepared to have had a shot that covered what was going on in this area or between these two people. But such is life. We can't see it all. And I still enjoyed watching the kind of craziness. Pre-tribal council and tribal council itself this episode. No surprise, whose head wasn't in the game? Adam gets voted out, duh. And then he gives his fire token to Denise, but he says, screw all of you. Angrily, screw all of you to the rest of them as he's not even near them. He's given a fire token to Denise. It exposes that emotion that I talked about that undermined his game throughout this entire season. It's just not to his benefit to be so sensitive, so tender, so detached from the calm and the distance from that kind of frustrated, negative, pessimistic emotion that can kill you in this game, that can lead to your being, if not disliked, an easy target. Bye, Adam. I don't think you played well this season. I think you felt like you did all you could, but I felt like you were coming from a terribly defensive place and you made terribly defensive choices about the ways in which you interacted particularly among a group of skilled players who aren't making those kinds of bad choices. So whether others are feeling threatened or feeling uncomfortably not certain about their own futures, or maybe they're in precarious positions themselves, they're not showing it the way you did. And I think that's good for viewers to see, that the way you played is not the way that the game is likely to be won. So just to clarify, this way in which Adam chose to interact and the emotion that he carried even out of the game, screw all of you kind of mentality, is from one of these more recent players that people call new school. And people talk about the old schoolers not being able to play in this kind of game. Couldn't disagree more, as I've said. And I want you to think about what it says about someone who can remain level-headed in the midst of such chaos. Because I think that's what a good Survivor player, even one who won the first season that far back, would be doing. So I still take all of your input with a grain of salt. And for those of you who don't think I would have a chance and my strategy wouldn't work, as if I have a particular strategy, I have lots of them, intelligence being the main one. And I would react in ways that were as level-headed as I was capable of being throughout any particular season. And I would love it if you would consider what it might look like if someone in the midst of the chaos, pre-Tribal Council and during Tribal Council, were acting very, very level-headed. There were a couple of them. And what it looked like is you hardly noticed them. That's the point. That's what you want in the midst of that. You don't want to be a focus. You don't want all eyes on you. Oh. Old school my ass. I think there was a way to play well, and I think there were a few who did. All that criticism for Adam, and as Adam walks to the edge of extinction, he makes the point that his thinking, the fleur-de-lis on the podium at Tribal was an idol, enabled him, allowed him to play more confidently, more cockily than he should have. There's some insight I wish Adam could have retained while playing instead of in hindsight. Because just the idea that it might be an idol, just the idea that you might have an out, a possibility, should never give a good Survivor player the kind of okay to be that way, to be overconfident, to be crazy or argumentative or negative in the way that Adam played. But I got to give him kudos, because even then, walking to Edge of Extinction, he seemed to recognize that. So that's pretty quick. Not quick enough. If it were quickly enough, he would have recognized it during the game. But he did recognize it. It did come to mind. Good on ya. Fun, right? Episode 9. Interesting game. Lots of freneticism. Clearly the heat is on and the boil is happening. And there's really no alternative to that, because there are all kinds of personalities and many of them skillful players. So there is going to be some level of this boiling, roiling kind of unpredictability, I think, from episodes here on. Fun. It's what we want as viewers, to see some exciting gameplay. I hope in the midst of it, we see some incredible, skillful choices. They excite me. How about you? 80% of you who are listening to these videos have not subscribed to my channel. Please subscribe. Just hit the subscription button. And hit the notification button and you'll be informed when I have another video up for you to listen to. After you've subscribed, comment. Comment positively, comment negatively. No holds barred. Just say what you're thinking. That's what will make our exchange even more valuable. As I'm able, I'll create new videos responsive to that commentary. So like away, or dislike on that rare occasion you may feel the need to do so. But either way, thank you.